Hey friends, hey besties, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Welcome back once again to my bedroom floor. I feel like all of my videos are filmed down here at the moment, but it's just comfortable, it's just easy, it just makes my life slightly easier. So hi. So today I'm filming for you my June wrap up. June felt like simultaneously the longest and also the shortest month ever. I feel like I lived several lifetimes in June. It was a crazy wild month and I'm really hoping that I can share with you guys something exciting very soon. I realise that I'm really annoying. I'm doing that thing where people are like, I've got something to share with you, and then they just don't share it, but when I do share it you'll understand why I couldn't share it sooner. So anyway, enough rambling. I'm just gonna get straight on into the books that I read during the month of June. There were 11 books I believe, so I'm pretty much averaging 10 or 11 books per month at the moment, but then have somehow also read like 74 books so far this year. So I think there's been a few months where obviously I've done a bit better. February I think was a good month for me if I remember correctly. But yeah, so I did 11 books this month, and the first book I read was on my Kindle, so I will insert a picture of the cover here, somewhere here. But that was Malice by Coralie June, which is book 1 in the Malice Mafia series, which I think is on Kindle Unlimited. I definitely read it on my Kindle because I read it on the way back up from London on the train. And I don't know how I felt about this book, honestly. I believe I gave it like 3 stars. I think it was just okay. I don't really remember because, like I say, I feel like I've lived about 3 lifetimes since the start of June and since reading this book. But I didn't hate it. It was just kind of average, and I think it was quite a bit shorter than a lot of the mafia romances I've already read. Now, like I said, it's the first in a series, so I'm assuming that hopefully the story will develop more in the 2 future books, because I do have the trilogy on my Kindle, so I will be finishing it at some point. But it was about this girl whose name I can't remember, who's working at a diner, and she lives with her gran, and her mum went missing when she was a lot younger, which is why she lives with her gran. Her gran's got MS, I think. She's got a degenerative disease anyway, and the girl's like working at the diner to basically save up for her gran's medical bills. And she makes friends with this girl who she sees like once a week, who comes in with a guy who's like a bodyguard to just chill and talk and eat food. And it turns out anyway that she is in the mafia, and that's her brother, and he's also in the mafia, and then this girl gets dragged into the mafia, and it's just like a thing, right? It's just a thing. I believe it's going to be like a reverse harem, why choose kind of situation. We're not quite there yet, but I feel like that's where it's gonna go. It was just okay. It was just okay. It was like medium spicy. It was slightly angsty. There was some tension in places. There was like a bit of a twist, but to be honest, you do kind of see it coming from a mile. But it wasn't bad. It wasn't the worst mafia romance I've ever read. It just clearly wasn't the best, considering I can barely remember anything about it. I feel like the writing was pretty average. That's all I can really give you on that one. So yeah, not my best summary to begin this wrap up, but hopefully the rest of these books I should be able to tell you a little bit more about them, especially the next book, which has skyrocketed to the top 5 romance books ever for me, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I ate this up. I loved this so much. This was a very easy 5 stars, and I think you guys will have seen my reaction to this book on a recent vlog. I absolutely loved this. This book, I related to Nora in so many ways, and I think that's why I liked it so much. I related to her daddy issues. I related to the issues that she has with romance and with men. I related to her love of books. I related to her like throwing her whole life into her job. Just all of it, honestly, was just so familiar to me, and I think that's why I loved it so much. And this actually made me cry at the end, so like that should say alone how good this book was, because I do find that I don't often cry at books. But honestly, this was just something else. Like, I loved this so much, and I actually really want to reread it already, but I'm trying so hard not to let myself, because my TBR pile, as I have said on many videos, is absolutely out of control. Like, out of control. But anyway, this book follows Nora, who is, I think she's like 32. She's living in New York. She's single. She finds it very difficult to hold down a relationship, and her sister decides to invite her to this small town, which is the setting of one of Nora's clients' books. Sorry if the camera angle has changed ever so slightly. My camera just died. Anyway, I believe I was talking about this absolute masterpiece. So anyway, they're in this small town. They are attempting to live their best life, only it's not quite living up to expectations. But Nora's sister is determined for Nora to tick off this itinerary that she has set. And one of the points on this itinerary is to go on some dates with some locals. So Nora is doing her best to go on these dates. But lo and behold, she bumps into her nemesis from the city. And let's just say that things start happening. I don't know how well I've summarised that, but I absolutely love this book anyway. Nora was just on another level good. I loved Charlie as the romantic lead. I loved everything about this, the banter between the two of them. I think that's what Emily Henry does so well. She writes such believable banter and flirtation. It's very realistic, and I think that's, yeah, why I like it so much, because her writing is just on another level. Then I read another 5-star read, and oh my god, I can't believe I've slept on this so long. I read If We Were Villains by Emil Rio. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. My only complaint with this, literally my only complaint, right, is that I accidentally spoiled myself for this book, because in the back of the book it has book club questions, and I was looking for the author information just like halfway through. I just wanted to read a little bit about Emil Rio, and I flicked the back page thinking I was going to find like the acknowledgements or the author bio, and instead on like one of the last 2 questions it kind of spoils who done it basically, and I was kind of pissed about that because I wanted to have that realization for myself. I feel like that twist, had I read it without spoiling myself, would have been like next level. As it was still really good. So this book is basically about a group of students at university. Is it conservative school? Is that what it's called? Conservatory school, yeah, so kind of like a university, and they're studying Shakespeare as drama students. So all of their classes are about Shakespearean plays, and as they're the drama students, they're always putting on plays, so everything's very like heavily Shakespeare coded. And I believe the author is also a Shakespeare scholar as well, so that's why she knows these books so well. So basically it's very similar to The Secret History. It's very dark academia. These students, rather than studying Greek and the classics like in The Secret History, they're studying Shakespeare and drama. But very similarly to The Secret History, one of their group gets murdered, and in this one we are following the main character who has just got out of prison, and he's finally talking to the police about who actually did the murder. Very good. Very good. I loved it. I loved it so much. I also want to reread that one, but again, not going to read it straight away, but that's definitely on my reread pile. Then I read We Had to Remove This Post by Hannah Burvots, which if you have watched my unhaul video, which I filmed the other day, you will know I'm actually unhauling this. It's going to go on this unhaul pile in a second. But this was basically about a woman who is working for a social media company. I think it's probably based off of Facebook/Meta, and she's a content moderator. So basically her job involves looking at all of these posts that have been reported or flagged and trying to establish whether or not they actually deserve to be reported or whether or not they didn't break any rules. So she's obviously being kind of exposed to very harmful content on a daily basis, and I thought this book was going to be about kind of how she handles that and how that affects her in her personal life, and I was quite looking forward to, I guess, like that exploration, that subject. However, it ended up being more about her interpersonal relationship that she had with a colleague at the company, and I just really didn't enjoy it. I didn't like any of the characters at all. It was just not what I thought it was going to be and not kind of what it was sold as. And it was a bit disappointing for me, so that is why I only gave it, I think, 2.5 stars, and which is why it's going in the unhaul pile, because I did not enjoy it, my friends. Then I finally finished it. I read Hunting Adeline, which is book 2 in the Cat and Mouse duology by H.D. Carlton. I think I gave this one 4 stars. I've actually honestly forgotten a lot of what happened in this book, but obviously it picks up from where the first book is left off, with all of the kind of cliffhanger that happens in book 1, and that is kind of the main storyline for the first half of the book, and then the second half of the book is kind of the aftermath of the storyline from the first half of the book. It was good. I mean, the spice was good, the writing was okay. I just don't think this is my favourite duology, honestly. Like, I'm glad that I've read it, but I'm not like obsessed with it. I won't be rereading it, but I am glad that I've read it. If you have not read either of these books, basically the Cat and Mouse duology is about an author called Addie who moves into her grandmother's house that was left to her in her will, and the house is kind of creepy. It's like low-key a little bit supernatural. There's some like ghosties and ghoulies going on, and she basically realizes that she is being stalked. But she starts to have some feelings for her stalker, which are perhaps not the normal feelings that you would have for somebody stalking you. And it also turns out that her stalker isn't quite what he appears as well. It's very good, it's very spicy, it's very dark. It has about 1,000,001 trigger warnings, especially this book. This book is a lot darker than book one, so if you read book one and you really struggle with it, I don't recommend picking this up. If you really enjoy book one, definitely pick this up, see how you get on with it. I like to say I enjoyed it, I just wasn't like over the moon obsessed with it, but it was still good. I'm glad I finished it, I'm glad I read it, I'm glad I know what the TikTok girlies are talking about now. Yeah. Then I read The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake, and I have to admit I only gave this one 4 stars. I really loved The Atlas 6. Like, I loved it so much, and I found this one just a bit slower. I found it a little bit harder to get into, and it just wasn't hitting in the same ways that the first book was. I think the first book I was so wrapped up in the characters and in this new world and in the magic system and just kind of exploring all of these relationships between the key players in the story, and like the end of the first book had me like literally gasping, screaming, kicking my heels. And then this one just fell a little bit flat for me. Like, I still gave it 4 stars, so I didn't hate it, and it certainly picked up more towards like the second half of the book, but I certainly found the first half really tricky to get into. But I actually ended up reading some interviews with Olivia Blake, and she was talking about the kind of creation or her creative process and like how she goes about writing and what she wants to put into her books, and in particular the Atlas 6 kind of trilogy. And she was mentioning that the pacing of the books being a little bit kind of all over the place is actually intentional, and she said that that's kind of what she loves so much about these books, and what a lot of the big fans of these books like. It's the fact that it goes quite slow and then it speeds up and it goes slow and then it speeds up again, and it's all kind of like interwoven with the physics behind the magic and everything else. So I think the fact that it is actually intentional definitely made it a little bit better for me. I read that interview I think kind of 3/4 of the way through reading the book, and so I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it. I have the next one, which I think is the last one, on pre-order, and I'm looking forward to it arriving. I'm not sure when it arrives actually. I think it might be next year or the very end of this year. But yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing the series. I'm looking forward to reading that book. This one wasn't my favourite, but I do feel like it was kind of suffering from middle book syndrome, filler book syndrome. I think all of kind of the events that the first book was kind of gearing up to will culminate in the last book. So all of that tension, all of that energy, all of that excitement I think is going to culminate in the last one. I think this was just kind of more of a filler book. But yeah, I didn't dislike it. I really liked it. It just wasn't as good as the first one, but I love this edition. This is the Waterstones. I think this one's signed, yeah. And the end pages are gorgeous as well. But for anyone who doesn't know what the Atlas 6 is, this is also a dark academia book. So it's signed. About a group of magicians who are gathered to basically study and help protect the Library of Alexandria, which is housed within this building in England. And basically the scholars are there for a couple of years, and they're supposed to contribute like findings and theories and work to the archives, and in return they have unfettered access to the archives. They can basically choose topics that they want to create like a thesis on, they can research it, and in return their research goes into the archives. But the twist is, at the end of the first year, 6 will become 5 because one of the scholars will no longer exist. So that is book 1. Book 2 is following on from the events in book 1. Loved it, I highly recommend it. Then I actually started filming a Instagram chooses my books, or Instagram chooses my TBR video. But I will say I've struggled to film a lot in June because my head has just been focused on the big thing, which I'm hoping I can talk to you about soon. So I haven't really had much of like a mental capacity for filming, which is why there has been slightly less in terms of like vlogs and stuff this last month. And I got halfway through filming this Instagram chooses my books, and I was like, I just want to be able to just read what I feel like reading in the moment. And I actually did get into a bit of a reading slump towards the end of this month. Not in terms of the fact that I couldn't read, like I was reading still, but just nothing was really doing it for me. And I think that kind of happened after this book. So this is Idol by Louise O'Neill, and I really enjoyed this. I've had this on my TBR for ages. This again is another signed copy, which I believe I picked this one up in foils perhaps. But this is, oh, I bought this because I thought it was going to be just like a bit of a satirical take on like influencer culture and like wellness culture and Instagram culture, and instead it's actually a thriller, and I really was just not expecting it. I went into this pretty much completely blind and I had a wild ride. I enjoyed this so freaking much. Like, I can't even tell you how much I enjoyed this book. It was a 5-star because I was just like blown away by it. I loved it. I loved the ending. I loved the twist. It was just so good. So we start off following Samantha Miller, who has made a name for herself as a bit of a wellness guru on Instagram. She's got like millions of followers. She goes off and does all these talks. She has like a rabid fan base who are absolutely obsessed with her, and like basically it's almost cult-like, the obsession with this woman and what she's managed to build. And she's got all of these platforms, all of these various different businesses that all eat into her like influencer umbrella, right? So the story starts with Samantha launching her new book, and she's doing like a big talk for it, and she starts to get some difficult questions from the audience, basically kind of criticizing, I suppose, like how inclusive some of her events are and like how ethical some of her practices are. So she is managing to like overcome these difficulties and answer these questions. She bounces off the stage at the end, speaks to her agent and talks about like how well she's done, but her agent's actually like kind of white-faced and terrified because she's had an email from somebody that Samantha used to know in her past accusing Samantha of something really quite awful. And so the whole book takes place from like a dual timeline perspective. You have current day Samantha dealing with the backlash, and then you have Samantha in the past, and you start to find out what actually happens and if this person is telling the truth. And oh my good god, it's so good. This is very like dark, feminine, very unlikable main character. It's so good. So Juno Dawson has said, no one writes the dark extremes of womanhood like Louise O'Neill, and that is literally what this is, like dark extremes of womanhood. It was fantastic, and I've actually put Louise O'Neill's other books directly on my TBR because that was so good, like so good. Then I read 2 books which kind of just fell a little flat for me. The first one was Animal by Lisa Taddeo, which I think I gave 3 stars to. This has been on my TBR for forever, and I haven't actually read Three Women, so I hadn't ever had a taste of Lisa Taddeo's writing before, but I thought I was going to really love this, and I didn't. Honestly, it just didn't really do anything for me. Like, the themes that it discusses are really interesting. There's a lot about kind of the emotional and physical toll the men take on women, and how, you know, we put our everything into these relationships and it's just not really reciprocated in the same way, and how men kind of consistently expect too much and take everything from women. That was very interesting, the way that that was explored. Marianne Key says it's like a series of grenades exploding, and it really is. Like, it's very triggering in places, and the way that these events kind of happen to this main character, you're kind of lulled into a false sense of security, and then it's like bam, you know. There should definitely be content warnings in this book, and there aren't, so I will say that it's definitely content warnings for sexual abuse of a minor, murder, suicide, like all of that kind of stuff. So definitely make sure you research this before you pick it up if you are interested in it. But it effectively follows our main character Joan, who leaves New York to travel out to California because she wants to meet this person that she's been told about by her aunts. Joan's parents have both died. She's got no family, she's got no like ties to the city, so she decides to go across country in her car and get away from everything. She's like left a series of broken kind of relationships behind her, and she arrives at this like little commune almost that she's living in, and it's her kind of like finding her feet, connecting with the person that she went out there to find. And then you learn a lot more about what's kind of chased her out of New York. Very interesting, very dark, but just not the book for me. And I think that's the book that kind of put me into my slump, because after that I really struggled to like enjoy anything the rest of June. So the next book I read after that was Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee, and I think I gave this 4 stars, but really it's probably more of a 3.5. This is about a group of Chinese American students who get hired by a corporation in China to start taking back these zodiac heads that are displayed in museums all across the world. very, very interesting discussions of like colonialism and how various countries, but mostly the UK, let's face it, seized a lot of artifacts and a lot of art that don't belong to us, put them in museums and haven't given it back to the countries that actually that art belongs to. I'm a firm believer, by the way, that all museums should have things on loan, and if the countries that actually, you know, have the ownership of those items want them back, we should be giving them back. I think the British Museum has a lot to answer for, honestly, but that's a topic for another day. This was very, very well written. It was definitely thrilling. It's like a thriller art heist, like kind of dark academia-esque novel. I loved the friendships in this book. I loved the relationships. I loved the characters. The problem was me, not the book. The problem was me, because I was just in such a slump by the time I read this. So I highly recommend picking this up, because if you do like kind of art heist books and you do like kind of dark academia vibes, I think you'll love this. So at that point I tried to pick up Fahrenheit 451 and realised that there was just no way, because my brain wasn't working, I was not enjoying reading, and so I knew that there was only one thing for it, the only thing that could bring me out of a slump. I reread Magnolia Parks. I gave it 5 stars because of course I did. This is one of my favourite books in the world. I loved it. It ate me up. I ate it up and it ate me up. It chewed me up, spat me out and completely emotionally destroyed me for a second time. So I loved it, and then I immediately afterwards read Daisy Hates and gave that 5 stars as well, because of course I did, because how could I possibly give these books any less than 5 stars? Did they wholly get me out of my reading slump? No. I'm still in it, but they helped. They helped me. They didn't cure me, but they helped me. They tried their best. But basically Magnolia Parks and Daisy Hates are book 1 and 2 in the Magnolia Parks universe, which is made up of the Magnolia Parks books and the Daisy Hates books. So currently we have 2 of each out, and they basically run on kind of chronological timelines. So you read Magnolia Parks first, then the events in Daisy Hates kind of take place at the same time as in Magnolia Parks, but with slightly different characters, different points of view, different takes on the same events that happen in this. You kind of get a better understanding of these like people and how they're all interwoven. I will say as well, there are some things in Daisy Hates that take place slightly after Magnolia Parks as well, so just interesting. But basically both series, or both books in the same series, follow this group of like socialite, high society Londoners. It's basically like Gossip Girl but in London. It's so toxic, it's so angsty and emotional, and I love every second of how like interwoven they are. They've got these like insane relationships and they get up to the most wild things, and I love it. It's so like, it is literally like Gossip Girl. And they go to this place called Annabelle's, and I actually went to Annabelle's in June, which I never thought I'd get to go to, because it's a very exclusive members only club, and I was taken. It was very fun. It was very bougie. I really liked it. I now want a membership at Annabelle's, but I can't afford a membership at Annabelle's. But anyway, I got to go to Annabelle's off of Magnolia Park, so that was a highlight of June. Anyway, that's all the books I read last month. I feel like that was a very like rambly, not so great wrap up, but honestly my brain's not working, so I really hope you guys enjoyed it anyway. Hopefully by the time it comes around to my July wrap up, I'll actually be able to like speak properly about the books that I've read a little more coherently and with like actual thoughts and opinions. But anyway, that was all the books that I read in June. So I hope you guys enjoyed the wrap up. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you were reading last month, and don't forget to subscribe if you are new. I love to have you all here. Yay. Bye.